Welcome to Aspire to Lead, where we empower educators and school leaders to grow, inspire, and thrive. I'm your host, Joshua Stamper, author, speaker, and leadership coach, bringing you conversations that spark transformation, challenge the status quo in education, and equip you to make a lasting impact on your campus or in your district. For more information and resources, visit joshstamper.com as we're looking to ascend to new leadership heights together. All right, welcome back. Happy summer to everyone. And I have a wonderful guest that you've probably heard many, many times on Aspire to Lead, but I was looking and I have dropped the ball. I have tripped and fell over because Mitch Weathers, you haven't been on since December of 2024.
I know. I've been, I don't want to say I felt a little neglected or ignored. We had a good thing going for like a month, every month there for a while.
I know. I was consistent.
Radio silence.
So I dropped a book during that time. I don't know if you saw that.
Oh, you were a little busy.
A little busy
about that.
Although, Mitch, you've been traveling like a madman. I mean, you've been all over.
Check out right here, always right by my side.
I appreciate it.
Telling everybody about this book.
You're awesome, dude. And well, I can reciprocate. I can do the same thing. You're right next to me.
Hold on, let's do a little.
For those who are watching on YouTube, there you go. Look. Right. I'll take a screenshot later and post it. So, buddy,
I've been on the road a little bit.
Yeah, you've been everywhere. We were just on a meeting with a couple other phenomenal educators, leaders, speakers, the whole gamut, authors. And you were talking about you've been like working with Nevada, and you were talking with a bunch of other folks. I think Vegas was another place that you're for a conference.
That's coming up with visible learning. I was in Hawaii last week. That was a really fun.
Oh, Hawaii. That was the other one I was thinking of. Yes. Yeah. So if you need a buddy to go with you next time.
Everybody's offering that with the Hawaii trip. It's interesting. I'll be in Miami next week and Miami in June. No, nothing but love for Florida and Miami, everybody, if you're there. Gosh. But no one's offering to come and with me to Miami in June. I'm not sure why.
It's weird.
Yeah, maybe it's the weather.
White sand beaches. Heck yeah.
It's going to be a little warm and humid, I think.
A little hot and humid, yeah.
It was like my trip when I was in Houston last August. I've never, ever experienced anything like that. And 2 weeks prior, I was in Nashville, also hot and humid. Nothing like Houston. Nothing like Houston.
No.
It was unbelievable.
Yeah. Arkansas can get up there too in the humidity. I've been there several years in the summer, and it's one of those things where you walk outside and you immediately are just wet and you're just like, what is happening?
I was working with the archdiocese there, so I got to visit some campuses, and it was that same thing where it was, super town. Loved being there, but we'd walk outside and it was like, I would start laughing like every time. I'd be like, oh my gosh, like this is like a full sensory experience, You're immediately sweating. For sure. And they would just chuckle along like, oh, yeah.
Outdoor sauna for you.
Yeah. Awesome. Pensacola, Florida reached out just a couple of weeks ago they're doing a book study with my first book.
Very cool.
And they at first asked, do you want to come in August? And I was like, yes, if I can, of my calendar. And then they got right back to me and they're like, actually, can we do January? And I was like, oh, bless you. Yes. Pick your day.
January sounds much nicer. Well,
nice.
We're going to be in California together. Part of that meeting was with the wonderful Kim Gamrose, who was on last week. So for those who are listening, if you didn't catch last week, make sure you do that. She's a ball of energy and talking about her event, Vibe EDU. And she made a little switch. So I think I can share this, that Mitch.
Yes, I just learned this morning. Yes.
Okay, folks, let me just share a little bit behind the scenes on this meeting. Is that Kim shared some awesome news that Mitch and I will be sharing a panel together. And I brought the excitement. However, Mitch did not reciprocate. And so I'm curious as to, Mitch, why was that?
So everybody back up a little bit there, Josh. Kim, who's hosting this Vibe EDU event in Los Angeles, first part of August, I think August 1.
Yeah.
I think actually.
Yeah, Anaheim.
And Josh and I have been really excited because although we've known each other and collaborated and been friends for quite a few years now, we've never met in the flesh. Close a couple times in Colorado, but I was just excited about that. But we were on different panels. So this Vibe EDU, you should all come if you're anywhere near Southern California. It's going to be a unique event, but we were on different panels. And right before Josh got excited, Kim had said that we're still on different panels. And then I missed it. It must have glitched out or something that Kim said, I'm just going to change it and then have Josh and Mitch on the same panel. I didn't hear that. I thought she was talking about the 2026 Vibe EDU.
So I got down.
I was excited. Josh was really excited, everybody. And I was kind of like, okay, we'll do that in a year and a half from now. That'll be great.
Yeah.
But I am excited. We're gonna have a blast. It's gonna be
it's gonna be amazing.
A great panel. Yeah.
You're not like 6'5" or anything, right? Like I'm not gonna tell you. Get off the plane and start looking up, and there's Mitch.
I'm half Portuguese, so you got probably not 6'5", but my dad is
Perfect.
Swiss.
Perfect.
He's 6'4". My dad's 6'4".
Good height.
I'm right about 6 foot.
I don't know why, but height is always the thing. I'm jabbering here, but like I got to see my co-author Charlie Peck just a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago, when I was in Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky, and right away she was like exactly the height that I just assumed she was, and I was like, I feel good. This is perfect. Yeah, I don't know why height has anything to do with it.
Yeah.
Anyways, I digress. So
we're going to be the tattoo panel.
We are
guys with tattoos. Speaking about,
you were joking that we were going to be in
muscle shirts.
Muscle shirts. So give a vibe for sure.
It's Los Angeles. We're crying out.
Exactly. All right. Well, for those who are listening, we'll drop that link in the show notes for everyone because
in all seriousness,
I think
it's gonna be a cool event.
It's gonna be an awesome event. If you look at social media, either on mine or Mitch's or Kim's, you're gonna see a bunch of different things as far as the speakers and the topics. But she's got such a heart and a vision that she shared with both of us that is amazing, and she really has the right mindset, the heart for where she wants this event to go as far as the impact. And so feel free to click on that. We're going to be hopefully doing some more content with Kim, just advertising the event, letting folks see behind the scenes in regards to what that's going to be about. But it's kind of like the anti-conference in a way. She really wants it to be separate and different than kind of your standard and your typical traditional conference. So that's super exciting.
Yeah, I'm excited to participate.
So you had touched just a little bit about your first book, which we were talking about today, which means that there's a book number 2, but I'm not going to touch on that yet. We're going to, at the end of our conversation, I want you to talk about that in regards to, what you're working on with Sarah. And Sarah's amazing. And I'm super excited about this project because me and you have had several conversations about it and you're working on it currently. But we're going to talk about your first book, Executive Functions for Every Classroom. Obviously, if you listen to prior episodes with Mitch, you've got to touch on that. But me and you have talked about just kind of the problems that we're seeing as far as when we're working with school districts, what the number one thing folks are coming with as far as a problem or a pain point. And for you and for myself, it sounds like a growing sense that kids are dysregulated, that they're having a tough time focusing in class, which of course then is creating some additional issues in the classroom and probably a loss of learning. And so for you, when they're bringing you a Mitch, like what are some things that you're working with them as far as practical strategies to help them through this pain point?
Yeah, that seems to be a theme. There's no doubt. We were saying I've been traveling quite a bit lately, and it doesn't seem to matter where it is or the grade level. So the need for this thing with state of Nevada this last weekend, that was the question that kept coming up. Like, why is this happening? Is it a generational thing? Is it a post-pandemic thing? But this kind of sense of the dysregulated classroom, the dysregulated student, and this lack of agency and self-regulated learning and all of that. So for me, I'm really committed to and passionate about this work being, like you said, practical, something that, we've all sat through professional development or professional learning experiences. And even if they're inspiring or exciting, if they require a significant amount of work on the backside, AKA not practical for the teacher I'm talking about here, it's just less likely to get implemented and affect change. So the work that I'm centered on, that first book, is 100% about. It's, I'm a teacher. I'm not a researcher. I don't even really consider myself an author, but I guess I am because I wrote a book and I'm writing another book. But it's all about like how grounded and practical can we make these strategies, which they all are, for supporting the development of executive functioning in students. And when we look at this specific need of, I'm just, like the dysregulated student. It's, in my opinion, that's the executive functioning or lack thereof. Students who are struggling with executive dysfunction tend to exhibit more dysregulated behavior. Now, of course, that's not the only reason that happens, but so that's the work, man. And it's been, I'm just super honored to be able to meet all these incredible educators and help equip them with some solutions and strategies that are practical, that can, like, do this tomorrow, start this tomorrow. Right. And so that would be, and I'm really excited to be, I mean, we're joking a little bit about the panel, but the language of behavior and your work it's the same conversation. Like some of these behaviors and, like you're saying, like just straight up classroom management issues are the byproduct, not willful defiance necessarily, but this dysregulation. Right. And how do we respond? Because we know that traditional behavior intervention, should we call it, isn't working.
It's consequences too, that they're providing. I think that was some of the things that we were talking about prior to even pushing record, was like, having a chance to meet with superintendents and administrators and teachers, and they're all saying the same thing, as far as the problem that they're seeing. And just that cycle of the things that they're putting in place as far as interventions are not seeing any better result. It's actually the negative behavior still is increasing. And so that's kind of, for those who are listening, obviously this is a time of reflection, as administrators are probably ending up their end of the year procedures and things that they have to get done before going into summer in preparation for the next year. But also teachers that are, I know a lot of them are in this rejuvenation stage, but also additional learning. So for those who are listening that just finished the school year, they are reflecting on, man, I saw a lot of behaviors that I haven't seen, or I saw an increase in dysregulation. What are some things that they can put in place next year? And obviously, this is a wonderful resource, but also they need to get in contact with Mitch Weathers. But, what are some practical tools that they can implement right at the beginning of the school year?
Yeah. So my work is all framed around what I call the 3 keys for supporting executive functions, which is clarity, modeling, and routine. But what it really comes down to is those are the keys, and, they kind of are the 3 pillars of our training and support. And if you read the book and book studies we've done, but it really comes down to how you shape the environment in ways that lead to better executive functioning. So it's not, these executive functions aren't taught. They're learned when I clearly see them modeled, and I get practice with them as a byproduct of engaging in this routine. So clarity, modeling, and routine. But when we look at specifically behavior in the classroom, and if we want to focus in on dysregulated behavior, you really have to kind of, lift up the hood a little bit and look at what's going on with cognitive load and the student's working memory capacity, because that's all what this executive functioning work is grounded in. And in fact, all learning, right? We have working memory, short-term memory, long-term memory, which is where we want the ultimate destination of things we're teaching and learning. Short-term memory is just what it is, right? This kind of like place where I temporarily store things, but working memory is an active space. And if you're listening right now, any thoughts you're having, that is happening in your working memory. And it's finite. It has a certain amount of bandwidth. And when that working memory capacity in students is overloaded, then you're more likely to see behaviors that don't contribute to learning, aka, classroom management issues. And so when we look at cognitive load theory, it's probably the most, in my opinion, the most important thing educators need to be aware of and educated about. Because when you start to look at the environment through that cognitive load and working memory lens, now there's different types of cognitive load. Cognitive load, when I'm just using my bandwidth or my capacity, like I talk a lot about this in the book, like for my students here in Northern California, I worked with a lot of multi-language kiddos, and if I was only speaking and everything was in English, they're going to use a certain amount of bandwidth just navigating the school day that is fatiguing. And if I'm using those capacity for anything other than learning, right? If I'm navigating the school day, maybe there's things distracting me in the classroom. Maybe it's the chaos I'm navigating outside of school because of my personal life and home life. Like, who knows what it is? But when that cognitive load is too high with what's called extraneous load, you start to see these behaviors are more likely to be exhibited. And it's harder for young students in particular to stay focused, to pay attention, to self-regulate I'm cognitively overloaded. And what we want to do is craft the environment in ways that reduces extraneous load, but increases or gives more bandwidth, if you will, or capacity to focus on what I'm trying to learn, which we would consider intrinsic load. So we want that cognitive load. We just want it to be around learning, and all of that working memory. That's one of the 6 executive functioning factors or skills, habits that I unpack in book 1. And it's a centerpiece, of course, for book 2.
Yeah. And then you talk about like trauma and chronic stress and some of these other things that, may be occurring in the lives of students. I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into what you're saying, but the environment is a huge piece to learning. And so you had mentioned book number 2. Let's segue into that. So I know this one has a different lens with Sarah and you. So will you share a little bit about what you're working on?
Yeah. Subtitle of book 1 is Creating Safe and Predictable Learning Environments, grades 3 through 12. And I kind of went around with Corin and I, we were, my editorial team and I were like, do we put that on or do we not? Because it's kind of, you kind of exclude.
Sure.
For me, it was about authenticity. I have experience actually teaching in middle school and high school, and I've spent a lot of time in upper elementary classrooms with organized binder work. So I felt very comfortable speaking to those bands 3 through 12, and even into college, but Corwin doesn't do higher ed. So the consistent feedback, though, has been when districts have done a book study with book 1 is, well, what about, K1, 2, K1, even 2, 3? And I would just share the story that I shared with you. And so I started I've had a number of them now. If a district or a school is doing a book study, I would invite the K1, 2 team, K1, 2, 3, and I would do like a focus group with them for me to learn. Like, hey, just tell me about this. Like, I don't want to pretend that your experience and your reality in first grade, for example, is anywhere like what I did in the 9th grade. And I've learned now working with Sarah, primary is just very different than the other grade levels. And we need to honor that. And oftentimes it's not. So I deliberately was like, no, I'm not writing that. I'm not going to write to that. And then one day I was, back up a little bit. Dr. Sarah Oberly, just finished her dissertation a couple months ago. We met. She hosted an event and she invited me to speak. We met, and she obviously had read my book. She had heard me on podcasts, and she's like, nobody is talking about executive functions as a tier 1. Like, all kids need practice with these, back to that kind of behavior and dysregulation we're talking about. Well, the good thing was I sat in on her. She gave a talk. I mean, she hosted this conference, but she was one of the speakers as well. And I had never heard, still haven't, a more succinct and clear explanation of working memory and cognitive load. I was just like, oh my goodness. And it was at that moment that I was like, I think this is co-author for book 2. Still took me a while to even want to write another book because, brother, it's so much work. But yeah, anyway, so book 2, I hatched the idea of let's have a parallel book. At least this was the idea. And so that when the K-12 district or state or a school wants to do a book study, do professional learning, dive into this work around supporting executive functions in students, they can do it. And it'll be very authentic in that space. And I pitched the idea to her, and she was like, I would love to do that with you. And I pitched the idea to my publisher at Corwin, and she loved the idea. And so we've been writing. We signed with them about 2 or 3 months ago. And it's been a wild ride, but I'm really excited. And I knew when we hatched the idea, I was like, this is my idea of what I think it will be, but I'm fully recognizing that we're stepping completely into the unknown. And that's been a really fun, challenging, but fun process and journey to be on with Sarah. So
very cool. Well, obviously we're going to be promoting that, and I'd love the two of you, once it's closer to the publishing date, to have you guys on and talk through the resource in more detail, so we get a real true idea of the impact that you guys have. I want to transition real quick as we're wrapping this up. You had talked about the conference in Vegas coming up here in July 24th. What are you speaking about at that event?
Well, I'm going to be speaking about executive functions for every classroom. It's the annual Visible Learning Conference, and that's all John Hattie's work around effect size, which is, I'm just endlessly fascinated by that work. And I've met with John a couple times on Zoom. I'm finally going to, it's kind of like meeting one of your heroes, not even dude's a riot on top of it, but I get to meet him in person. He's keynoting, of course, opening and closing, but I'm really honored to participate in this.
Very cool.
From what I understand, it's Corwin's event. It's Visible Learning, but they invite a handful of their authors to give talks, and then there'll be like a book signing event afterwards. So it'll be a very unique conference experience for me, but I'm going to be talking about how do you do this work around executive functioning at a tier 1 level so that every kid on campus, every kid in the district gets practiced with these skills and habits. So that'll be my focus. Yeah.
All right. I will make sure that link is also in the show notes for folks for this conference here that Corwin's kicking off. And again, that's July 24th that Mitch is speaking. Obviously, the event's going to be several days during the month of July there. But we'll make sure that we put that in for folks to make sure that they're tapping into that, because, if you're living in that area and you want to see all the amazing Corwin authors that are going to be speaking, make sure that you're signing up for that too. And then, of course, I'm going to have all of the links for Mitch as far as, I've been flashing up the organizedbinder.com for folks. Mitch, is there anything else that I missed as far as things that are coming up for you?
Not by the time this comes out.
Well, I know you're kicking off school, for the beginning of the year. So obviously, if this is something, the topic that we're discussing is a pain point for you, obviously Mitch has quite a few different strategies and systems that will benefit you and your campus, your district. So make sure that you're tapping into all of the wonderful things that he's got going on. But with that, Mitch, I want to thank you for a lot of things, but for 1, being on Aspire to Lead, 2, for the work that you're doing with educators, but 3, just being an awesome human being. And I am super excited to present or be on a panel with you.
Be on a panel. Yes. Me too. With our muscle shirts.
Awesome. All right. I hope everyone's having a wonderful time. If you need any support, of course, Mitch and I are here for you. And I promise I will be more consistent to have Mitch back every single month. You can keep the fire on me, Mitch, in regards to making sure that I do that. But I love spending time with him, but also learning from Mitch here. So I'm looking forward to seeing you next month.
Me too, man.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at www.teachbetterpodcastnetwork.com. We'll see you on the next episode.